Hello everybody and welcome to our webinar on top tips for writing education and training foundation tender responses. I'm Sue Southwood and I'm joined here with my colleagues Daniela and Imka, and between us we're going to run this webinar and answer all your questions. So as we begin, I just want to introduce the aims of the session and what we're going to cover today. We are going to go through all the sections of the standard tender response in quite a bit of detail, offer you some guidance using real examples, and there'll be two opportunities to answer questions, to ask questions that we will answer, one in the middle of the webinar and one at the end of the webinar. And this recording will include answers to questions that we don't manage to fit into this 45 minutes. So everybody's question will be answered by the team either today as part of the recording or as an appendix online. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. Before you even begin writing a tender response, what we'd really like you to do is look at the Foundation's website and look at what we do. What are our aims and objectives? We are here to support the workforce in its entirety across different settings: further education colleges, offender learning, independent training providers, and adult and community learning. So you may be from a particular part of the sector, and we value your expertise because of that, but our work covers the whole sector. So have a look what else we do. If this tender response is perhaps particularly for practitioners, have a look at what we also do for managers and leaders so that you can see how this bit of work fits in with our wider work. Please familiarise yourself with all the work that we do because we cover such a range of work. We've commissioned a range of research that's all on our website, and make sure you're really appraised of all the work that we do to support the sector so that when you fill in your tender response, it fits into the wider whole. Have a look at what's the rationale for this particular piece of work. So as part of the invitation to tender, we will always include our rationale for this piece of work. It will have come from the sector, it will have come from research that we've commissioned ourselves or we've found through desk research, but you may be able to add to this rationale, and you may want to put in your rationale for the particular approach that you have. And we're always really pleased to see this, that any piece of work is evidence-based and that we have confidence in what you're doing fits in with what we want to see. So we have a process through my tenders where you can ask questions. We have different numbers of questions for different tenders. Sometimes we get lots and lots, and sometimes we don't get very many. But we would encourage you to ask questions. I'm going to hand over to Daniela, who runs this process, for us to tell you a bit more about that.
Basically, once you've registered your interest in a specific ICT, you'll be able to not only download all the information, but also ask questions via the answer and questions facility. So questions are posted anonymously, and we will respond to those as soon as possible. You'll also receive an email notification to say that the question or a question has been posted, and also that we have responded to it. So please do make use of that facility. No question is a silly question.
Excellent advice there, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the next slide, which is about your project impact and outcomes. We are interested in two things here. What are you going to do, and what difference will it make to the sector? We get a lot of confusion about outputs, outcomes, and impact. So an output is the results that you achieve immediately after implementing your activity. So, for example, producing a resource for teachers would be an output. Outcomes come a bit later when we start to see some change from the output that you've produced. For example, we might see teachers using the resource. And impact is usually a longer term result. It may not be achievable in the life cycle of your particular piece of work, but it's the long-term impact that we want to see. For example, in this example, learners would benefit from teachers using this resource. So a research-related example could be, output would be a survey of employers' views on maths and English, for example. The outcome would be that report is used as a basis to develop a new curriculum, potentially, and the impact of that bit of research would be that the curriculum would better prepare learners for the workplace based on employers' views. So please be clear about output, outcome and impact. What are you going to do and what difference will it make to the sector? They're the two things that we're really interested here. So please be clear when you're writing a response to tender. Don't use up too much of the word count, selling the benefits of your organisation, telling us how brilliant you are and wonderful you are and all the great things that you've done. Whilst that's quite an interesting read for us, too many organisations spend too much of the word count doing this, and it's not actually relevant to what they're going to do. So what we want to hear from you is, how is your organisation is a good fit for this particular piece of work? So in some ways, less is more here. Don't feel that you have to use up the entire word count. If we've said 800 words, often people use 799 words. Try not to concentrate too much on that, but actually step back and think, how is our organisation best suited to this piece of work? What's our capability and what are the skills of our staff to really carry out this particular piece of work for the foundation? Don't repeat back the language that we've already used in the ITT. Use your own language and speak in a very clear way, just outlining what you want to do for this particular piece of work. Don't forget to demonstrate impact and only list outcomes. As I mentioned earlier, people do get outcomes, outputs and impact very muddled up. So please do be clear. How will your piece of work make a difference? This is a really important slide. You need to be very clear about what you're going to develop and deliver. So if it's a tender response for CPD, for instance, what CPD are you going to develop, and who are you going to deliver it to? We want to see an understanding of the full range of the sector, and we also want to be clear on reach. So how many people will benefit from the work that you're going to do? So reach can fall into 3 levels. Direct participants who will be coming along to your CPD session or event. You might be able to add indirect participants who will benefit from a formal dissemination session, learning from the people who've been along to that event, so people who are cascading it back in the workplace to their own teams. You can count that in your reach as long as you clearly explain the difference between the direct and indirect participants in this particular piece of work. And the 3rd level is kind of the broadcast level. So what wider dissemination will there be as a result of this work? Will there be blogs? Will there be articles in magazines? How is the work being made to reach a much wider audience? So they're all targets that you can include as long as you explain clearly the different levels of reach. But we're very interested in reach, and we're interested in how you've thought about reach. So for example, if you're going to run a webinar, the people who attend the webinar will be direct participants of that webinar. If that person who attends the webinar then goes back to their workplace, runs a cascade session, that's an indirect participant that can be counted, or perhaps 10 or 20 indirect participants. And if you write a blog as background or to boost the webinar, then we'd include that as broadcast. So they're the 3 levels. You don't have to use that model, but that's kind of model that makes it very clear what impact your work is what reach your work is going to have. Please be clear, as I said before, about how this fits in with the wider ETF agenda. What else are we doing? Are there links to the professional standards, for instance, that underpin everything that we do? How does it link if it's for practitioners? How does it link for the work that we do with leaders and managers? we obviously, when we write an ITT, think that there's a clear case for what we're proposing to do, and we will often put evidence for this. But you may know of more evidence that brings in a different, perhaps, focus to this piece of work. So don't be frightened to bring, in fact, we want you to bring your expertise to the table here. We want to know what you're doing and why you think it's a good thing. We also need you to outline quality assurance. Too many tender responses don't mention quality assurance or just mention it in passing. But we want to be, you are our delivery partner, delivering work on our behalf. So it's really important that you have robust quality assurance, and we need to know how that works. Okay, moving on to the next slide. The next section is approach and methodology. So this is really quite clear in the tender response how to fill this in, because we always put a table, and you can see it here in this slide. But it's surprising, even though we put the table in, people aren't often clear about their approach and the methodology that they're using. This is the place that if you've got a clear project plan, this is where it should be. What are you doing, when are you doing it, and at what stage, what milestones have you got within that project plan? And think about it in terms of how it's being scored in terms of other tender responses. So if you just put the bare minimum, there might be 2 or 3 respondents who are also saying, well, yeah, we're going to train 100 teachers to doing this, using this resource. So think how you can rise above those other people. What value are you adding to it that you can shine above those other people who are responding to tender? Moving on to the next slide, the common mistakes here are just too much text that really says nothing about your approach and nothing about your methodology. Sometimes people repeat things in this section that they've already put in the project outcome section before, and it doesn't state why you've decided on your approach. Is there an evidence base to why you're choosing this particular approach? Why do you think this is a good thing to be doing, and what is it based in? Too many tender response documents have no mention of risk or don't include a really properly thought through risk log. They make no mention of data protection, and they also don't make any mention of sustainability. So the ones that stand out are the ones who have all these things in, particularly sustainability, because we give out work on an annual basis, but obviously we want each piece of work to live beyond the life of the funding. So a tender response that clearly says how it's going to be sustainable beyond funding will be a much stronger response than one that doesn't mention sustainability. We know that SEND isn't just about learners with really high needs, with health and social care plans, EHC plans. We think about SEND in its widest sense. So we really want each tender to think about the people who are benefiting and the learners that are benefiting in that widest sense. How is this piece of work, how can we really be reassured that it's going to be inclusive of all learners? So although EDI does have its own section, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that later, we do want to see EDI embedded across the tender response document. Okay, so I'm going to kind of summarise what I've said so far in a tips slide. So do include target numbers. It's very, very difficult for us to score a tender response, even if it looks really good, if it doesn't have any numbers in it, if it doesn't have any reach. It's really hard for us to see how that tender response will give us value for money. If we've had very few tender responses to that piece of work, you might be lucky enough to be called to interview. But if we've had a lot of strong tenders and there's a big response, that will be something that means you don't make it into the final selection. Please tell us how you will assure that your products will be user tested. Are you going to pilot them? If you're going to pilot them, who are you going to pilot them with, and how? How are you going to? We're looking really for reassurance that you're not just going to develop and go out and deliver straight away, but you're actually going to run this resource or this training past a group of a representative sample of the sector, and that's inclusive of the whole FE sector. So we're talking about adult and community learning, further education colleges, offender learning, and the workplace, the sector in its broadest sense. Don't be afraid to be innovative. We try not to be too prescriptive in our invitations to tender and to leave room for innovation, because there are lots of examples where people have filled in a tender response and can quite clearly do the work that we've asked for, but they've also brought something new to that tender response, a suggestion that's come from them, that something that we haven't thought of. And we're always pleased to see those ideas as part of tender responses. As I said before, quality assurance is absolutely critical and it must be included. Think also about our digital estate. We have Foundation Online Learning as our online platform. So any online learning modules or any work online that we commission, we will want it to be written in a way that it can sit on our Foundation Online Learning Moodle site. We don't want to commission different online learning platforms. Think about any resources and how they can be cascaded via the Excellence Gateway. The Excellence Gateway is still hugely used and hugely popular, and we like to put all our resources on the Excellence Gateway. Okay. Capability, capacity and skills. Please explain why your organisation is ideally suited to carry out this particular piece of work. Again, don't fall into the trap of just saying how great your organisation is. Many organisations are great, but what we're looking for is how suitable is your organisation to do this piece of work. Tell us who's going to be involved and what role they have in this particular piece of work, and only highlight their relevant qualifications and skills. We do sometimes get lots of annexes with lots of CVs where it kind of feels that everything's been thrown in, but it's not really been thought about who's going to do this and why have we chosen that particular person or that team of people. Too often we get copy and pasted lots and lots of similar projects that the organisation has done, but that doesn't really add value to a tender. Much better to say less but make it relevant. Okay, if you do any work for us, we do want the communications plan to come from you. We do have a comms team and they will support you. But we do need you to include a comms plan that shows us how you will disseminate this work. So if you're going to run courses, how will you fill those courses? If you're going to disseminate resources, how will you disseminate them to all parts of the sector so that everybody benefits? Okay, so I've rattled through quite a lot of slides there, and we're going to pause for a few minutes where hopefully we've had some questions come in. Okay, let's go to our first question.
Well, we have one from Jackie. When an ITT has multiple strands, how do we respond if we want to apply for more than one strand?
Okay, shall I try and answer that one? I frequently put out ITTs with multiple strands of work, and I do try to make it clear that you can apply for one strand or multiple strands of work. But ITTs are written by different people in the foundation, so if the ITT isn't clear, it would be very good to put this onto a My Tenders question. But each ITT should be clear about whether you can just apply for one strand of work. Often it's quite an efficient way of putting out an ITT with lots of different strands, because it's part of a wider piece of work and it gives big organisations a chance to say, well, I could do all of those strands, but also allows smaller organisations to say, well, I can just do this one strand, but I can do it really well.
And final one for this section from Gary. To remain within the given word count set out in the tender response document, is it acceptable to attach annexes or appendices?
Yes. Well, people do this, but well, I mean, I don't know what your responses would be for my colleagues around the table, but I personally don't like it when there's too many graphs and charts, which is another way of getting around the word count, and too many annexes. I think we think about the word count quite carefully, and you should really be able to answer the question with the word count. So the answer, I guess, is yes, you can use appendices and they won't be counted in the word count, but be mindful of really you should be able to do everything in the tender. So yes.
Including all essential information in the actual tender response document and anything additional as appendices, but it should really be part of your response.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's your job to make it easier for us to say who is this organisation, how are they going to do this work, how are they going to quality assure it, rather than our job to trawl through pages and pages of appendices to find out all the relevant details. Okay, shall we move on? Because I think we're quite on time now, and if you think of more questions, do post them because there'll be another Q&A session at the end. Okay, so we've got some slides now on EDI, and as we start this section, we're going to just reflect back onto the ETS EDI objective. So this is on our website. This is why we're here. We want a more diverse teaching workforce. We want more diversity in leadership, as well as to improve the ability of all leaders and practitioners. That's our EDI statement. When you're filling in this section, do think about how will you address the specific barriers which are leading to inequality within your sector. So for this particular piece of work, ask yourself what inequalities are there and how are we going to address them, and it will be different for each piece of work. Also, is your partnership diverse? Is it representative of the workforce? If it is, tell us that. How will you ensure access and inclusion beyond the 9 protected characteristics? So many tender response, it just feels like it's been copy and pasted. We are aware of the 9 protected characteristics, but we're looking for a lot more than that. The 9 protected characteristics are the baseline. We expect a lot more than that. How will you monitor and change things? Are you able to identify any priority groups and meet their particular needs? Are you aware of any priority groups that are particularly disadvantaged, and how can this piece of work make that more inclusive? Okay, so here's some sentences that are taken from genuine responses to tender. Whilst I wouldn't disagree with any of them, and they are all very good things to say, they're not sufficient on their own. You can't just say, yes, it's really important. Yes, we treat everyone with respect. Yes, we do this, we do that. It's not sufficient on its own. You need to go beyond these kind of statements. So you need to be specific to the tender. Don't just copy and paste all or part of your EDI policy. Too many people do that. And we're looking in this section for thinking about the piece of work that you are doing. How is EDI important? What is not just about your policy, but about your actions? How are you translating your policy into actions? What are you actually going to do to make your piece of work more inclusive? Use it as an opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge and any relevant achievements you've got in this area, and give us some actual examples of things that you've done in the past. So keep it very concrete very specific to the tender, and not just writing words for the sake of words that sound great, but in reality, what do they actually mean? Okay, thinking about costs, we do have to be really mindful about how much we're spending on each financial year. And one of the things we're really looking for your response to tender is what value does it bring. We're also looking sometimes for very basic information that can be really, really difficult to find. So if you're going to train 500 people, is there a price per head of cost of that training, a price per course? Have you included reach numbers so we can look at, well, how much money are we spending and how many people are we going to reach? And once again, when our funding runs out, what value will we continue for this, so that we don't just get value for money whilst the piece of work is being undertaken, but when the piece of work is finished. Okay, so we've been through all our main slides, and we've got another opportunity for questions. Any questions from anyone?
Well, the question about the Foundation Moodle platform that we use, and so that's about the particular system that we use. And do you want to say anything about that? The Foundation Online Learning platform is the Moodle platform that we use for all our online courses. Whenever we commission any work for online courses or online modules, there will always be quite a prescriptive text within the ITT that tells you exactly what you have to do and how you have to do it. If that's not clear to you and you still have more questions, then that would be the time to ask a question through My Tenders. But it's probably worth restating that, you know, some people might look at a tender and think, well, we've got a course like that, we could just tweak it a little bit and it would meet your needs. That's very difficult to do because we want all of our online offer to be part of Foundation Online Learning. So you need to think how you can actually make that transition if it's from a different platform to ours. And Foundation Online Learning is free to access, so you can register and have a look around.
Absolutely, yeah, good point, good point. Do familiarise yourself with what's on there already. If you're filling any tender response to do with online learning, have a look what's there and get a feel for the kind of courses that we commission and how we run them.
And another question?
From Matt. If a tender has been published whereby an organisation isn't necessarily in a position to lead, but contribute as a partner to a lead organisation, is there a brokerage facility available?
That's a really good question. It's up to you to form your own partnerships. We have run commissioning workshops in the past where we've tried to get people together so you can get kind of a lead partner or a prime with a sub contractor. So we have done things in the past where we've tried to facilitate this, and we will probably do things again in the future. But it's really up to you to, if you think you can do a part of a piece of work that we're putting out to ITT, the onus really is on you to find those partners and to look for those partnerships. And, you know, there's lots of ways that you can do that. I mean, Twitter is a very good way of finding organisations, for instance, social media. But the onus is on you to form those partnerships. We can't suggest partnerships because we're neutral.
And that's why we quite often break the tenders into strands. That
yes,
it's possible to apply for a smaller piece of work within a larger ITT.
Yeah, and it's another important thing to say is some of our partners in the past, our delivery partners who delivered work alone have got to know other people and have teamed up in partnerships, and they've gone on to be quite successful partnerships.
One thing you could do, just to see who we've contracted with in the past, is go onto our website under the Tenders About Us bit and look at the contracts list, which lists all of the contracts we have issued over the last 3 years and who we've worked with. And you can see what programs they've worked on and therefore whether they might be likely to be interested in future tenders, and contact them there, look at their website and contact them and take the initiative.
Yeah. We always try to give plenty of time, particularly if we're putting out a large ITT, we'll give a longer time for recognising the fact that it takes time to get partnerships up and running. You also need to make clear in your tender response document how you're going to work together, particularly if you're a large partnership. Who's going to be the named person for us to liaise with, and how is your partnership going to work?
One follow-up question from David is it all based on Moodle?
I think that's related to foundation.
Foundational learning, yeah.
Foundational learning is a Moodle environment. Some of our courses, all of our courses have to be compatible with Moodle. Not all are based on Moodle. Yeah. I think I'm right. I'm no expert, but I think that they all sit within the environment, but they're not all developed in Moodle.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on? Because I think or have we got any more questions?
No.
Let's move on.
One more was just popped
through.
Okay.
Go on then.
We move on.
Okay.
Please, could you provide some guidance on tendering for projects which are not direct responses to invitations? Can suggestions be put forward from institutions for areas of research or development?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would say all of our work is co-created with the sector and comes from the sector. So we have quite a lot of different channels where we will be listening to the sector and what they want. So I would say yes, it is worth emailing in to the relevant person or letting us know if you've got a good idea. We do sometimes have single source tenders for under £10,000, and that's a possibility. But we definitely want to know your good ideas if you have them. Yeah. Okay. So if we move on. So just to summarise, read the invitation to tender and answer the questions. That seems a very obvious thing to say, but it's surprising actually how many tenders that you read and think this is just so way off. They really haven't understood what we're asking for. So if you don't understand what we're asking for, seek clarification through my tenders. You can ask multiple questions, it's not a problem. Some ITTs we have no questions. What's the most we've had, Daniela, on one ITT, do you know?
About, I think 25 for one of them.
Wow.
That was quite a high value invitation to tender.
Yeah. So, seek clarification, familiarise yourself with our work. Please be clear, concise and jargon-free. Make it easy for us to read and understand what you're going to do. Provide good and relevant experience so that we have confidence that you can deliver what we're asking for, and clearly demonstrate the impact that you're going to make. Everything we do is about improving outcomes for the learners. So learners are at the heart of everything we do. All the ITTs I write are all to do with maths and English, and the impact that I want to make is to improve learner achievement in maths and English. And please be innovative and creative. Give us some great ideas if you've got them. And finally, I just want to say we do really want to work with a diverse range of delivery partners. We always like it when we receive a tender response from someone new who's not worked with before. It's our intention to continually work with new delivery partners, and that's one of the reasons for running this webinar today. And that's because we want to commission the best partners. At the moment, it's really difficult because we can see that some people are very good at bid writing and they're very good at delivering the work. And what we want to happen is that people who are good at delivering the work can also become very good at writing bids. So this is what we're trying to help you to do. Hopefully there's been some little nuggets of information for you as part of this webinar. You've had plenty of opportunity to ask questions, and hopefully we'll answer them. So before we wind up, any more questions coming through?
There's just one that's come through. One for you,
sorry. The ITTs are directly sent by you, or we can access them from your website. Is there any place we need to register to get the ITT? So we publish all of our ITTs on the MyTenders portal, www.mytenders.org. And if you register for free with that website, you will then be able to access or register for all the ITTs that we publish. All of our ITTs also appear on the government's grant finder website, which has got a link on and will take you to the MyTenders portal. But yes, we publish everything via MyTenders, so just register there and you'll have access to all of them.
And the next question from Joy is about feedback we give to unsuccessful tenderers. And I think that we give quite detailed feedback based on the moderation meeting that we have with the moderation panel or evaluation panel here, and we give individual feedback to all tenderers.
We do. Our intention with feedback is that it's formative and that it will help you write a better tender next time, most definitely. So we're going to wind up now. I want to say thank you to Imka and Daniela for helping me with the questions and putting this webinar together, and I'm going to hand back to Julie to say goodbye.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue, and also to Imka and Daniela for doing the webinar today. We hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much.